Good morning, Snook. It's Andrew here, the minister at the Robertsdale Church of Christ. Thad, about a week or so ago, asked me to make a video to encourage you guys and to look at some scripture. And so I was glad to get to do it. Of course, I would much rather be there in person in chapel, being with you guys. That's always a highlight to me, but still is glad to get to do this and hope it's an encouragement to you. So what I did was I started to watch some of the other videos that Thad put together and watched some of the other ones that were done. And when I was looking through those, I watched the one where Thad had a race. And number one, I didn't know it was fair to run a race holding an umbrella that you could block a child with. So there's that. But one of the things that he also did, he challenged my son Cameron to a race. And so I watched that video with Cameron and showed it to him. And I said, Mr. Butts thinks that he could beat you in a race. To which Cameron replied, no. And I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I want to race him. And I said, so I sent text to Mr. Butts and I said, hey, Cameron wants to race you. He said, okay, that sounds great. And then Cameron, his only response was where? So anyway, I can't wait to see that on video and can't wait to watch that race. And Mr. Butts, you are not allowed to carry around an umbrella next time. So I used this illustration a few weeks ago at Robertsdale. And so I wanted to share it with you guys. And then we're going to look at some scripture that I have on my computer here in just a second. So as you can tell, I'm in the kitchen here at the church building. All right, you can see all the kitchen stuff there. And so I wanted to show you guys something that is actually, hold on if I can get this camera turned around. Well, all right. I want to show you guys something that is in the deep freezer here at the church building. Let me unwrap it. Do you guys know what this is? It's a cow tongue. And yes, I'm touching it. And yes, that's blood. It looks very disgusting. It is in plastic wrap. I don't think blood's getting through yet. So it's starting to. Okay, never mind. So I'm going to hold it with this in. This is a cow tongue. And so those of you that have ever listened to a lesson from me, you know I like using visuals and illustrations. And so I did a sermon here at Robertsdale on the power of the words we say. And so since I was doing that, I was like, all right, I wanted them to understand that the tongue is a big deal. And so I Googled what animal has a big tongue. Turns out it was a cow. So there's a place here in Robertsdale called Farm Fresh Meats. And so I went to Farm Fresh Meats and I said, hey, I'm wanting to do a sermon on the tongue. Do you guys have cow tongues here? And she said, yes. She said, I've gotten requests before from people to, send in a cow or to use a cow tongue, but it's usually Mexican restaurants for tacos. And I'll get to that in just a second. But never have I been asked to get a cow tongue for somebody for a sermon, but sure. And so she said, I'll be right back. And so she goes to the back and she brings that cow tongue out and she wraps it up in this plastic and sits it on this little thing. And then she puts it in a paper bag and wraps that up. And then she staples the receipt to it. She put a lot of work into giving me this cow tongue. Well, then she says the price. And I thought going in, like the whole reason I was wanting to use this illustration, I was like, it won't be expensive, right? At the most, a cow tongue is going to be $5 because who eats a cow tongue? I go ready to check out, get ready to check out. She said it's $30 for this thing. Okay. And so I saw the work she put into the cow tongue and getting it ready and the fact that she had already wrapped the thing. I was like, well, I can't say no now. So I bit the bullet, as they say, and I bought a $30 cow tongue. And so I was like, all right, not only am I going to use this at Robertsdale, but I put so much money into this, I'm going to use it at Snook too. But then there's, to me, a little bit of an illustration in that. You know, when we think of the tongue, we don't think of it as a big deal, partly because we don't notice it. Even in the book of James, it says that it's a very small member of our body. But even though you and I don't think it's a big deal, God sees it as a huge deal. In fact, one of the sentiments that we've shared before when it comes to our words, we'll say things like, well, it's just words. You know, it's not, it was just something I said. But the book of James says something completely different. No, the words that you say, they matter and they have a huge impact. In fact, the way I like to put it is like you see your tongue like this, but God sees your tongue like this. He sees it as something enormous. He sees that it has incredible potential to do a lot of bad, but it also has a lot of potential to do a lot of good. And so what I want to do is I want to read you guys a few passages, if my computer will turn back on. And one of those comes from James chapter 3. And in James 3, he says this: we all stumble in many ways. But he says nobody is perfect when it comes to the tongue. And so what he's letting you know, the church here he's writing to let us know, everybody is going to have an issue with saying something they should not say. But then he says this, that if you can control your tongue, you can actually control your whole body. So what he's saying is this: if you can get control of the things that come out of your mouth, you can actually change the kind of life you're going to have. I want you to think about that for a second. That if you want to change the life you live, change the words you say. Not only do your words impact you, but they impact other people. And one of the things that scientists have said is that there's a little place in our brain between when we think something and we say something. And one of the things I've tried to do in my life is to pray for that little space in time between I think something and say something. And so James is trying to give you an illustration of how much of a deal this is. He goes on to say in chapter 3, verses 3 and 4, he says, if you can control your tongue, it's kind of like putting a bridle in a horse's mouth. It's that little bitty piece of metal, but if you put that little piece of metal in this huge animal, you can control where that animal goes. That's what he's saying with your life. If you can control your tongue, you can control your whole life. You can change the life you live. But then he also gives an example of a boat. He says kind of like the rudder. It's that little thing on the back of the boat that turns it left and right. He said, man, if you can just get control of your tongue, you can steer this huge thing. Well, then, which of course he's referring to as our life, but this is what he goes on to say. Oh, there goes the light at the church. Let me turn it on. This is live action, so there you go. All right. He goes to say in James 3, he says, so the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. It can set on fire the whole course of your life. So like I said earlier, sometimes we'll say, well, my words don't matter. Well, my mom, when she was in elementary school, she was on a school bus. And there was a time where they were singing, and she was singing out, and a kid on that school bus says, you have an ugly voice and you don't need to sing. And so one Sunday when I was a kid in worship, I noticed that my mom wasn't singing out. And so I asked my dad, I said, why doesn't mom sing out? She has a great voice. He says, well, when she was in elementary school, a little kid said that she had an ugly voice. Guys, that happened when she was like in 3rd or 4th grade. And here she is now today in her 60s, and those words have stuck with her this entire time. And so what I just want to encourage you guys with is to know the power of your tongue, to know the power of the words that you say. And that not only, as this text is saying, is it going to help your life, but it's going to bless somebody else's. And so be careful what you say, but also think of this cow tongue. And that while you may not think that your words are that big of a deal, they are a huge deal. Give life-giving words. And so what I want to encourage you to do is this. If you think something good about somebody today, I want you to say it. Like if you think, man, that person, they did good on their speech, let them know. If they had a good serve, let them know. If Sam French is on the football field and flattens somebody, be like, man, Sam, that was awesome how you tackled that guy to pieces. Let them know what you appreciate about them. So if you think something good about somebody, say it. Use the power of your tongue.